Hello everyone. Sorry for the long break between videos. I was busy with university assignments and other things. Today I'm going to be ranking the 34 Formula 1 World Champions in a two-part video, which will then be combined into a full-length video following the completion of the second one. The champions will be ranked on three factors. These are longevity, peak performance and impact on the sport. Peak performance will count for double the importance of the other factors, as I think it's the best representation of a driver's talent. As it's very hard to rank drivers across different eras with this particular system, favouring more recent drivers, I would like to remind everyone that these rankings are subjective and they are not to be taken as absolute facts. Furthermore, these rankings are based purely on their time in Formula 1 and not in other series. With that being said, let's get into the video. Phil Hill is undoubtedly the most forgettable Formula 1 World Champion. He only won 3 races in his career and he has the lowest career points for a champion with 98. He only had 4 competitive seasons and only had his World Championship guaranteed when his main rival, his teammate Wolfgang von Trips, crashed and died in the penultimate round in Monza. He's undoubtedly a good driver, however there are many better drivers who never won a title, such as Jacques Villeneuve or Stirling Moss. His career may have been screwed over by an ill-fated move to the ATS team, but he left a great manufacturer in Ferrari for a very bad rebel attempt in 1963, which plummeted his career aspirations. He then joined the Aileen Cooper team for 1964, only scoring 1 point across the entire season. He then spent a year off in 1965 before returning in 1966 as a privateer, racing a Lotus 25 and then a McLaren M3A, unable to finish either of the 2 races he entered. Then he joined Dan Gurney's Anglo-American Racers for the Italian Grand Prix, but he failed to qualify and promptly retired from Formula 1 at year's end. Hill for me is the least talented champion, as he didn't achieve much before or after his championship in Formula 1, and his championship was handed to him on a plate by the death of his teammate. Mike Hawthorn was the first world champion from Great Britain. He started racing in F1 in 1952, picking up a podium at Silverstone. Then he joined Ferrari in 1953, winning his first race in Hulme. He then finished third in the 1954 standings, getting another win. Apart from that, he was involved in the crash that caused the Le Mans disaster, but that was outside of Formula 1, so it doesn't matter for this ranking. He would have lost his 1958 championship to Stirling Moss had Stirling not been a gentleman and made sure that Mike didn't get disqualified from the Portuguese Grand Prix during his championship winning season. He retired immediately after he won his only title due to the death of teammate and close friend Peter Collins earlier in the season, meaning he didn't really have much longevity. He holds the joint record for least wins in a champion's career and least wins in a championship winning season with 3 and 1 respectively. This meant that he didn't really have a high level of peak performance either. He is the most obscure British champion and, in my opinion, the least talented British champion in F1 history. Giuseppe Farina was the first F1 champion in 1950, winning 3 out of 7 races, and then he spent a few more years driving for Alfa Romeo and Ferrari respectively, with his final win coming in the 1953 German Grand Prix, until he semi-retired after the 1955 season, making his last Grand Prix start in the 1956 Indy 500, aged 49. His career really got shagged by World War II, along with many other drivers of his era, but winning a world championship with Fangio as your teammate is no mean feat. Denny Hulme, yes that's how it's pronounced, is the first and so far only Kiwi or New Zealander World Drivers' Champion. He only ever got 1 pole position in his whole Formula 1 career, and it wasn't during his title-winning season. It was in fact 7 years later. He beat Jack Brabham while driving for the team that bore the Aussieman's name. He was known for being a ragged and messy driver, especially during his early car racing years, as he drove barefoot to have more feel of the car. Nonetheless, his style worked as he was mega fast, because he won the world title in 1967 and stayed in Formula 1 until 1974, competitive even until his final season, which he took his pole position in. Surtees was a 7-time motorcycle champion when he made his Formula One debut in 1960, getting his second place during his second race at Silverstone. After a relatively uncompetitive 1961, he got 2 consecutive 4th place finishes in the drivers' standings, including his first win in the 1963 German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring Nordschleife. Surtees won the championship in 1964, then stayed competitive well into the late 60s, retiring in 1972 after driving for his own team for 3 seasons. His car racing career was nowhere near as successful as his bike racing career, however he remains the only driver to win titles on both 2 and 4 wheels. Jody Scheckter is the only African Formula One world champion. He was a staple of the mid to late 1970s, racing for Tyrrell and Walter Wolf Racing. He got his big break at Ferrari in 1979, teammate to the great Jacques Villeneuve. Jody beat Gilles to the title by 4 points, but following an abysmal 1980 season, which saw Ferrari fall off a cliff in performance, the South African retired from Formula One, having only scored 2 points in that season. He was very competitive during his career, and he beat many legends in his time, and is still the last African driver to compete in Formula One to this day. His spell at the top was short but prominent, and he fell into obscurity quite quickly following his retirement. James Hunt was a no-nonsense playboy-type racing driver during his F1 career, debuting for the laid-back Hesketh team, getting 2 podiums in his first season. During his junior career and early Formula One days, he garnered the nickname Hunt the Shunt for his tendency to crash often. After a string of retirements amongst podiums, points, and his first win at the 1975 Dutch Grand Prix, it all came together in 1976, although it didn't seem that way at first. After the 9th round at Brands Hatch, Hunt was 23 points off of championship leader Niki Lauda, which is a lot considering you only got 9 points for a win back then. Not the possible 26 that you can get today. By the time Lauda had returned following his fiery accident, James was only 2 points behind in the title race. He won 2 of the last 3 races that season, finishing 3rd in Fuji to secure the title. Following his title win, he got 3 wins in 1977 before a swan song in 1978 and 79, which saw just 1 podium at Paul Ricard in 1978. Hunt only had 3 competitive seasons, and yet, to this day, he is revered due to his interesting approach to both driving and commentary, which came later in his career. The father of Monaco-based YouTuber Nico, Keke Rosberg drove in Formula One for 9 seasons between 1978 and 1986 for a variety of teams. The first 4 seasons of his career from 1978 to 1981 saw him only garner 6 World Championship points, most of which came from a 3rd place in the attritional 1980 Argentine Grand Prix. He left the Fittipaldi team following a pointless 1981 to join reigning Constructors' Champions Williams for 1982. Following a bizarre 1982 season which saw 11 different drivers win the 16 races, with 9 consecutive different race winners in 9 consecutive races, Rosberg was champion. He may have been lucky, with several other teams having internal problems, such as Ferrari, who lost Gilles Villeneuve and Didier Pironi mid-season due to injuries or due to death, and Renault and Brabham both having reliability issues with their turbo engines. Nevertheless, he was a worthy champion. Following his championship win, he spent 3 more competitive seasons with Williams until he moved to McLaren for 1986 following a fallout with Patrick Head, the person who took over running of the Williams team following Frank Williams' road accident which saw him become permanently paralysed. Rosberg would have won his final race in Adelaide had he not retired due to a puncture, although he later said that had he continued he would have given his teammate Prost the win to help him win the title that year. Keke only had 5 competitive seasons, but he was nonetheless a great driver who was lauded with shite machinery in his early career. Jacques is a very polarising figure in the Formula One world. His early career showed insane results and great drives, but it seemed that he turned into a bog-standard midfield driver soon after his title win in 1997. He pushed teammate Damon Hill all the way in his debut season in 1996, only losing out on the title following a retirement in the final race for Suzuka. Then when Hill was dropped in favour of the young Heinz-Harald Frentzen for 1997, and he subsequently underperformed, this left an open goal for Jacques to win the title in the best car. Unfortunately for him, Michael Schumacher battled him the entire way until the final round in Jerez, when Schumacher tried to take him out and was promptly disqualified from the driver's standings, also promoting Heinz Harald to second. Following his title win, Jacques wouldn't win any more races and only got 4 podiums in the next 9 seasons, 2 each in 1998 and 2001 respectively. His late career results didn't represent those of a champion, and following his departure from Formula 1, which came from him not wanting to compete with young upstart Robert Kubica for a seat, he went on to become one of the most disliked members of the Formula 1 community, spouting some of the worst opinions in the history of the earth. One such example is that, following Robert Kubica's sensational return to full-time Formula 1 in 2019, Jacques said that it was a joke that disabled people were allowed to compete in Formula 1 because F1 is meant to be full of the best drivers in the world. These comments seem a little bit ironic, considering how for a good portion of his Formula 1 career, he drove so slow that it could have passed for being disabled. Washed driver. After 2 seasons in relative uncompetitiveness, Alan Jones joined the Shadow team for 1977, where he got his and the team's first win in Austria and a 3rd place in Monza. For 1978, he joined the up-and-coming Williams team. Although results were underwhelming in the first season with the team, he got 4 wins late in the 1979 season to claim 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. His 1980 title-winning campaign saw 5 wins and 10 podiums, finishing 13 points clear of second-place Nelson Piquet in the Brabham. The preceding season in 1981 saw Jones bookend the season with 2 wins at the season opener and finale at Long Beach and Caesars Palace respectively. With these wins and 4 other podiums, he claimed 3rd place in the Drivers' Championship for the 2nd time and promptly retired from Formula 1. Despite this, he made a one-off return at the 1983 US GP West, a race he had won before, although he retired late on in the race due to driver fatigue. After sitting out in 1984 following a failed fundraising attempt, he joined Haas in late 1985, that is, the original Beatrice Haas Formula 1 team, not the current Haas team on the F1 grid, and Jones didn't finish any races due to the car being unreliable. He stayed with the team for 1986, scoring 4 points thanks to a 4th and 6th place finishes at Austria and Monza respectively. Following the team folding due to a lack of money, Jones retired from F1 again, this time for good. Overall, he was a very talented and consistent driver who didn't have much time in the spotlight, only having a championship-winning car for 3 seasons in his Formula 1 career. Jochen Rindt is the only posthumous Formula 1 world champion in history, having been killed during practice in Monza 4 rounds before the end of his title-winning season in 1970. Rindt made his Formula 1 debut in the inaugural Austrian Grand Prix held at Zeltweg in 1964, although he retired from a race due to a broken steering column. Signing for the formerly championship-winning team in Cooper in 1965, he got his first points with a 4th place finish in the German Grand Prix at the Nordschleife, then got a 6th place at Watkins Glen. He stayed with Cooper for 1966, claiming 3 podiums and 3 other points finishes to claim 3rd in that year's Drivers' Championship. Following 2 relatively uncompetitive seasons with Cooper and Brabham, which only saw him finish 4 races in total, he joined Team Lotus for 1969, claiming his first win in the US race at Watkins Glen amongst 2 other podiums in Monza and in the Canadian race at Mosport Park, claiming 4th in the drivers' standings. In 1970, Jochen started the season by finishing neither of the first 2 races. He followed this up with a win at Monaco, overtaking Jack Brabham at the last corner of the final lap following a lock-up from the Australian. He retired at the next round in Spa, the last race on the 14-kilometre layout of the circuit, but followed this up with 4 consecutive wins in Holland, France, Great Britain and Germany. He retired after starting on pole in Austria at the new Österreichring circuit, leaving him on 45 points, 20 clear of second-place Jack Brabham as he headed into Monza. However, he crashed during Saturday practice, hitting a stanchion head-on at top speed after losing control aggressively, leading up to the corner that was known then as Parabolica. Jochen was killed on impact. He didn't start the race, and following the checkered flag in Monza, there was 20 points between him and 2nd and 3rd places in the Drivers' Championship. This gap was closed to 17 at the next race in Canada, meaning that if Jackie Ickx won the final 2 races and providing Rindt's ghost didn't get him any more points, Ickx would be world champion. Ickx got 4th in the next race at Watkins Glen, meaning that Rindt had a 14-point lead going into the last race, with only 9 points on offer for a win. This made Jochen the only posthumous champion in F1 history. He won every race in which he saw the checkered flag, with one of the most impressive title runs in history, despite only having a finishing rate of 38.5% throughout the season. He has mostly been remembered as the posthumous champion, although most newer fans know him only as an anecdote from the past. Damon Hill's path to Formula 1 was unusual to say the least. His motorsport career started at the very late age of 21, sporting the same helmet design adopted by his father Graham, the colours of the London Rowing Club. Another thing to note is that his motorsport career started on motorbikes, not cars, although after a few seasons of bike racing, his mother persuaded him to take up the much safer alternative of racing cars. It's a shame she didn't do the same thing for Graham in relation to airplanes, but each to their own. Damon started his full-time car racing career in 1985 in British Formula Ford and the Formula Ford Festival, getting 3rd to help Team UK. Hill then spent 3 years in Formula 3 before moving to Formula 3000, similar to modern-day Formula 2, for 1989, where he would stay until the end of 1991. During 1991, Hill became test driver for the Williams team before moving into F1 full-time, driving for backmarker team Brabham in 1992. After a junior career which had lasted 10 years, Hill was now making his Formula 1 debut aged 31. In his first season, he drove hopelessly slow machinery to 2 race finishes in Silverstone and Hungary, not qualifying for any other races during the season. At the Williams team, following the departure of reigning champion Nigel Mansell to kart and second driver Riccardo Patrese to Benetton, Hill was surprisingly promoted to the second seat alongside 3-time world champion Alain Prost. After a clumsy start to the season, Hill's performance has picked up towards season's end, and he picked up his first race win in Hungary after losing 2 potential victories in Great Britain and Germany in both of the 2 preceding races. He won another 2 races that season before Ayrton Senna joined the team following Alain Prost's retirement. After Senna's untimely death at Imola, Damon assumed the role of number 1 driver as rookie David Coulthard was promoted to a full-time seat. After another sketchy start to the season, Hill engaged in a close title battle with Michael Schumacher's Benetton, losing out in the final race in Adelaide following an incident which was definitely Hill's fault. He finished runners-up again in 1995, but Schumacher was far more dominant during that season. 1996 was his championship year. Following Coulthard's departure to McLaren, reigning Indy 500 winner Jacques Villeneuve joined Hill at Williams. Damon only finished off the top 2 podium places twice, racking up 8 wins and 2 second places across the season. Hill was then ousted by the higher-ups at the team, with everyone bar the team's star designer Adrian Newey wanting young German Heinz-Harald Frentzen instead. Both Hill and Newey left the team, with Damon going to Arrows and Newey to McLaren. Arrow's master plan, under the guidance of Tom Wilkinshaw, had failed to materialise as of yet. Shock news, it never materialised, and Damon only got 2 points finishes, with a 6th at Silverstone and an iconic 2nd place at Hungary, although if not for late race reliability issues, it would have been a win. For 1998, he joined Eddie Jordan's Jordan team, where, in his Jordan, the Jordan failed to score points in the first 10 rounds of the season. Following Hill's first points finishes for Jordan in Germany and in a wet, chaotic Belgian race, he guided his Jordan to Jordan's first win and also Jordan's first 1-2 finish along with Ralf Schumacher in his Jordan. Hill finished his first season with Jordan in 6th place in the driver's standings, showing clear potential even at the ripe old age of 38. Jordan moved into 1999 with much optimism and potential, which we realised by Hill's new teammate Heinz-Harald Frentzen, an ironic pairing considering it was Frentzen who was responsible for Hill's Williams departure. Frentzen won 2 races, finishing 3rd in the driver's standings, whereas Damon didn't even get a podium. Clearly getting fed up towards the end of the season, he retired from Formula 1 after retiring a healthy car in the final race at Suzuka, having mentally checked out. He was outscored 54-7 by Frentzen in his final season, clearly past his best. Damon's F1 career started late and he peaked early, meaning he only had 4 seasons in the spotlight, but nonetheless, he was still a very quick driver with incredible talent, especially in clutch situations, such as the 1994 Japanese Grand Prix, which he had to beat Schumacher in to keep the title fight close. He then proceeded to beat Michael by 20 seconds in the rain. His peaks were high and his troughs were low, unable to get much out of uncompetitive machinery, but doing well during his heyday of 1994 to 1996. Alberto Ascari was described by five-time champion Juan Manuel Fangio as the only driver he ever feared. The Italian won 2 championships in 1952 and 53 during the 2 seasons that Formula 1 was ran to Formula 2 regulations, both in very convincing fashion. Ascari won 9 consecutive races from a 1952 Belgian Grand Prix until the same venue a year later, although he did miss the Indy 500, which was won by Bill Vukovic. After his dominant championships, he joined the Lancia Works team in late 1954 with hopes to build the team up to dominate. Unfortunately, Ascari was killed 4 days after the 1955 Monaco Grand Prix in a testing accident at Monza, putting an end to the Lancia dream, as the car concept was sold off to Ferrari, who promptly won the 1956 championship with Ascari's adversary, Fangio, at the wheel. Alberto definitely had buckets of talent and potential, having died aged 36, which may be old by today's standards. However, Fangio was 10 years older when he won his last title just 2 years after Ascari's death. The Andretti name is synonymous with success in motorsport nowadays, with the Andretti IndyCar team, which is also looking to join F1 in the coming years. Mario's path to F1 was an unusual one, competing in IndyCar, NASCAR and endurance racing for 4 years before racing in Formula 1 for the first time in 1968, aged 28, getting pole position on his debut at Watkins Glen, a feat only equalled before or since by Giuseppe Farina and Jacques Villeneuve. He spent quite a few years running in multiple series, including the aforementioned Indy and NASCAR, along with sports cars and Can-Am. His first full-time campaign in Formula 1 was in 1975, racing for Parnelli Ford, getting one fastest lap but nothing else of note. 1976 saw him switch to Team Lotus, proven championship winners in the hands of Jim Clark, Graham Hill, Jochen and Emerson Fittipaldi. Andretti got his first win in torrential rain at the final race in Fuji, finishing 6th in the driver's standings. He improved to 3rd in the driver's standings in 1977 with 4 wins before winning his title in the 1978 season aged 38. Andretti's championship was guaranteed at the third to last round in Monza, where his teammate and championship runner-up Ronnie Peterson was killed in an accident. Following his championship win, Andretti spent 2 unsuccessful seasons with Lotus before moving back to Alfa Romeo in 1981, but was again unsuccessful, and he retired from Formula 1, having only got 2 points in the previous 2 seasons. Despite this, he came back for his home race in Long Beach for Williams in 1982, qualifying 14th and retiring due to a collision. Following Didier Pironi's career-ending crash, Mario stepped in to fill the gap for the final 2 races of 1982, getting a pole position and a 3rd place finish at the ripe age of 42. He then retired from the final races of the season and the final race of his Formula 1 career with suspension issues. Andretti was a jack-of-all-trades driver, skilled in many different categories in a way not often seen today. His sons and nephews have pursued racing as well with varying success. However, Mario was undoubtedly very quick, but because this list only counts achievements in Formula 1, he is further down the ranking than he probably deserves. Fittipaldi, like Andretti, is a name embroiled in motorsport. 4 drivers in the Fittipaldi family have raced in Formula 1 with different levels of success. Emerson and Wilson raced during the 70s, whereas Christian raced during the early 90s and Pietro stood in for Romain Grosjean following a crash for the Frenchman in the 2020 Bahrain GP. 2-time champion Emerson's heyday was the early to mid-1970s, racing for Lotus and McLaren, although he only won titles with Lotus. Following a second-place finish in the 1975 Drivers' Championship, Fittipaldi joined his brother's Copa Supercar team, where he spent 5 seasons in uncompetitive machinery, only getting 2 podiums in the 5 years he spent driving for the family team. He retired in 1980 before moving on to IndyCar in 1983, winning the title in 1989, aged 43, before retiring in 1996. He was very popular in America, just like Andretti, however, was more competitive during his heyday than the American driver, hence his higher ranking. Bad career choices meant he didn't fulfill his potential in Formula 1, however, he is still an icon of the sport, regardless of these issues. Nico Rosberg is a Monaco-based YouTuber who wants to be 8-time Formula 1 World Champion Louis Hamcheese in equal machinery to win an F1 championship. His fastest laps and points position on debut in 2006 showed his potential, and he stayed with the flailing Williams team until 2009, picking up a few podiums and other good results here and there before he moved to Mercedes for 2010, partnering a returning Michael Schumacher. He performed admirably, getting his first win in China 2012, outperforming an ageing Michael in all 3 seasons. Once Lewis Hamilton came in, Nico struggled to beat him. He finished behind Lewis in the 2013 standings, despite winning one more race than him, and in 2014, it saw Nico take Lewis to a title decider in the double points finale in Abu Dhabi, although Lewis performed better across the season. 2015 saw Nico also lose out after a gust of wind blew him off course in Kota. For 2016, however, a mix of good luck and great driving saw him pip Lewis to the title, and he promptly retired immediately after. Now he does punditry for Sky Sports, with his expert analysis as a recent champion. He was definitely not the fastest driver in the world, but he was very consistent, and he hardly ever made mistakes which allowed him to win his championship. Nelson Piquet is a controversial figure in Formula 1 today. His problematic opinions and statements divide many in the Formula 1 community. However, back in the day, he was a very, very talented driver. After 2 years in Junior Formulae, he did 5 races in F1 in 1978 with BS Fabrications, Ensign and Brabham respectively. Brabham signed him up for 1979 and he got a fastest lap at Watkins Glen. 1980 was a more competitive season as he won 3 races and got 6 total podiums to claim runners-up in the Drivers' Championship behind Alan Jones Williams. As Nelson's paid driver teammate Hector Rabac failed to perform any better than mediocre during his Formula 1 career, the Brabham team stumbled to a 3rd place constructors finish behind the all-French Ligier team. 1981 will be different, however. Piquet won 3 races throughout the year, and going into the final race of the unimaginative Caesars Palace circuit, Nelson was just 1 point behind the Argentine Carlos Reutemann and 5 points clear of Frenchman Jacques Laffite, meaning it was a 3-way title battle. Reutemann had a reputation for either being amazing at driving or outstandingly mediocre when driving in Formula 1, with no way to tell which Carlos you would get going into a race weekend. I guess it's kind of similar to another Carlos in Formula 1 today. Piquet drove safely to 5th place in the final race to secure the title, as a mediocre Reutemann couldn't muster a points finish, only getting 8th in an era where only 6 drivers scored points. 1982 was a transitional year for Brabham, switching from the ubiquitous Ford Cosworth DFV to BMW engines, with designer Gordon Murray unable to develop ground effect technology at the same pace as the other teams like Williams and McLaren. Piquet scored points thrice, with 2 podiums including a win in Canada. Piquet's second title-winning season was 1983. Similar to 1981, he won 3 races, however, unlike 1981, he had a competent teammate. Italian Riccardo Patrese was a race winner already by 1983 and took another win in South Africa, also suffering the brunt of the DNFs for Brabham that year, with 10 to Piquet's paltry 4. Bad reliability meant they finished 3rd in the Constructors' Championship behind Ferrari and Renault. However, in 1984, Nelson suffered many DNFs, failing to finish 9 races across the season, however winning 2 races. 1985 was another slump season, as Piquet won just 1 race and he left Brabham for Williams in 1986. Nelson won 4 times, 1 time less than Nigel Mansell, however only finished 1 point behind the well-loved Brit after having to pit due to safety concerns in the final race following a spectacular blowout on Mansell's car. His 3rd and final title win came in 1987, although Piquet used internal politics in the Williams team to get an upper hand on Mansell throughout the season, beating Nigel to the title by 12 points. Something else of note, following a crash in Imola during his final title campaign, Piquet said that he lost 80% of his depth perception, and that following that year, he only raced for the money. He joined the Lotus team for 1988, replacing his compatriot Senna, who was off to McLaren. Nelson failed to win all season due to the Lotus's uncompetitive chassis, repeating this feat in 1989, where he didn't even appear on the podium. Following Lotus's switch from Honda engines to those of Lamborghini, Piquet departed the team, fearing that the new engines would be uncompetitive. With no top teams having seats left, he joined Benetton, where he won twice, right at the end of the season before heading into 1991. He achieved 1 win in Canada, courtesy of a late breakdown of the Williams of Nigel Mansell. He initially spoke with Ligier and Ferrari looking for a seat in 1992, but announced his retirement before the start of the season. Overall, Keke was a very controversial but also very talented driver. He knew how to get under his rival's skin, and he knew how to race aggressively. Nowadays, he is banned from the Formula 1 paddock due to his derogatory comments towards Lewis Hamilton. Some of his controversial comments across his time in Formula 1 paddock include calling his ex-teammate Nigel Mansell an uneducated blockhead and calling his wife ugly. He also referred to his compatriot Senna as gay as late as 2020, also labelling Senna as a Sao Paulo taxi driver. And following a news reporter asking him who was the better driver between him and Senna, he proclaimed, "I'm alive." Nelson's comments further included ones directed at Lewis Hamilton many years following his retirement from racing. He called Lewis the N-word and also referred to Lewis as gay, stating that Hamilton lost the 2016 championship to Nico Rosberg because he was, quote-unquote, giving too much ass at that time. He also referred to Nico's dad, Keke, as a turd that has no value. This long list of comments is the reason why he is banned from a Formula 1 paddock. And with that, the first part of this video has ended. I had to split it into two parts because I genuinely didn't realise how much writing this video would take, hence the very long gap between videos. I can only apologise, and hopefully, after this ranking has been published, I can return to my previous video schedule. With that being said, I hope everyone enjoyed watching and has a fantastic day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.